Hello, beautiful Facebook community. Hello, fam. It's Joshua Hathaway here. Just stepping into the fire as usual. And there have been so many incredible things happening in the world. In my world, in our world. And there are so many threads to this vastly complex weave. But as I like to say, the world is unimaginably vast and yet so intimately woven. And I'd like to do my best to share a little bit about my experience over the last few weeks of witnessing the confluence of COVID and some radical justice consciousness, some tremendous grief, the re-traumatization of a community, and the response of that community to that experience. And the way that these are woven together in my inquiry around sacred masculine, around protectorship, around what it means to live in a truly safe and thriving community, how we even envision that, around equity and prosperity for all, and around personal and collective accountability for what's happening, as well as themes of reconciliation, which have been really rich in my own personal and professional inquiry right now. And it's also a little experiment in whether or not anybody even sees this live, because a lot of my lives have not even been particularly well viewed recently, but they've all been streaming from Zoom. And as an experimenter, I just want to see if I go direct live from my computer. Let's see what happens. So I have no idea how long this is going to be. I have no idea what exactly I'm going to say, because I haven't prepared any notes. But I know that I'd like to begin with something of an attunement. And I'd like to invite anybody who's present here, who's watching or listening, to just take a moment to slow down and to take some deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth with me. And I'd like to start in a place where I believe that we can all agree, because I'm probably going to say some things that we can't agree on yet. But where I want to start is a vision for the world that I'd like to live in. And I'd like to ask you to share a comment or to name something about the world that you truly want to inhabit, the world that you are here to co-create. Because I think one of the challenges that we're experiencing is to actually vividly imagine a better world, because so much of our capacity to imagine is caught in assumptions and programs that were built into us by the world that is in many ways being transmuted right now into something much more beautiful and powerful. But our very capacity to imagine is an essential capacity to put our attention on that world, not to the exclusion of what is problematic, what is unsafe, and what needs desperately our attention in the world of today, but because it inspires us and because we get to remember where we're headed. And I like to imagine a world as I just stand here on this beautiful earth, as I stand here beneath heaven, as I stand here as this human conduit between heaven and earth, as I stand here as a being whose ancestors go all the way back, to the earth and the sun themselves, who made love and produced, by whatever sort of metaphysic you come to understand, produced the first life upon this planet, from which I am an inheritor. As I stand here as the progenitor of my generations to come, as a father, as a beloved friend, as a lover, I imagine a world for my grandchildren, for my children, that is filled with prosperity for everyone. And by prosperity, I don't mean exorbitant wealth. I mean plenty of what we actually need. Plenty of shelter and water and food, organically grown from the vines running along our own houses. Plenty of joy and laughter and safety. Plenty of beautiful homes. Plenty of clothing to wear in whatever season we need to wear it. Plenty of opportunities to contribute meaningfully to a society that we understand is for our collective good. Plenty of love. Plenty of safety for our children to play unhindered, to grow and develop as their unique selves in a way that is not prescripted and stamped by a program that is meant to keep people small. I envision a world where there are so many ways to get around, bicycles everywhere. Public transportation is so elegantly and beautifully arranged in that world. That people are living in small communities and large communities and even larger communities, that everybody knows their neighbors. I imagine a world where we know the names of all the people who live within a 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 foot radius of us, depending on the density of our neighborhood. That we have neighborhood councils that meet regularly to talk about issues that are happening in our neighborhoods. That we have people everywhere in these places who feel empowered to be keepers of the peace, because we are all keepers of the peace, because there is nobody else who is here to keep the peace but us, the people. I believe in this world, and I that's just a glimpse of a world that I hope that we can all agree we want to live into. A world where everybody has all of their needs met, especially their basic needs. A world where people can take care of their health. A world where people can feel safe walking down the street. A world where education is for the people. A world that is investing more resources into education and supporting life than it is into weaponry and supporting violence. A world where our media is honest, where we at least have media that's accountable to factual information that we can all trust. A world where we're connected. Thank you, Cass. A world where of connection and safety for women and children. A world where the feminine is deeply honored and respected and protected. Where children are honored, respected, and protected. The most vulnerable people in our society. Black people, brown people, all the people are honored and respected, listened to, and valued, right? So that's just the baseline of what we want to create together. And my own life is always a laboratory for what I am, what I'm chewing on, and what I'm investigating and trying to understand and embodying in certain ways. And this has been an incredible ride for me in my own personal journey. So I have a few stories that I'm going to weave into this, some mosaic sort of philosophical pieces and stories. And the through line here, for me, is that we are in an unprecedented moment of being able to reimagine what a safe community is and how we keep our communities safe. And that every part of this inquiry is not just about out there, the community out there, the city, the town. It's about the community right in here. That the inner experience and the outer experiences are reflections of one another, perfect and beautiful. And that while we may not yet agree sufficiently on how we get there, I do believe that everybody, no matter what your sort of political orientation is, wants a world where everybody is thriving, right? And if you don't want that world, it's an interesting thing to be curious about. If you don't believe that world is possible, if you believe that this world can only, that people can only, some people can only thrive at the expense of others, or that human nature is not such to create such a society, then I invite you to really check in with those assumptions. Ask yourself, is that true? Do I know? Can I be absolutely certain that that is true? And if that is, the answer is no, then that's an assumption worth questioning. And we're in a time of inviting a lot of people to question their assumptions right now, as we are dealing with a massive outcry from the black community, but that is being sort of supported by lots of community around how we police, around how we keep our community safe, around what justice looks like and how it is distributed. And one of the things that I have had my finger on the pulse of for a really long time is the conversation around restorative justice, around justice that is not meant to punish, but that is meant to restore balance, that is meant to restore connection, that is meant to restore humanity to all people involved. And our systems are very much defined by a punitive mentality. Punish them. And not just our systems. I want to invite everybody on this call, just like every single thing I talk about here in terms of a political or a societal situation, to look at the systems within your own self. How often do you call yourself names? How often do you use punitive justice inside your own body? How often do you punish yourself unconsciously? And how often do you punish the people around you for not doing what you want them to do? How deeply have you been trained by this society to use punishment to get children to do what you want them to do? Right? And I think we're emerging, we have an opportunity to, in a big way, take a leap right now out of this cage of punitive justice and into the world of possibility around restorative justice, and what it means to show up for a conversation when harm has been done, what true accountability means. And I can't talk about any of this without talking about all of it right now, because it's all so richly woven together in my mind. And I want to talk about accountability for a minute, because this is a core aspect of a safe society. You can't have a safe society where accountability is not equally held, right? Accountability, not punishment. I want to be really clear about that. And in my life, just in my own personal life, I've had these moments of really highlighting for me my role in being a person who shows up accountable and also who holds others accountable. Because part of my role, as I see it, as an incarnation of the divine masculine, messy and imperfect as I am, is as a protector, is as one who is a safe space in the world. Where I walk as safe space. I bring safety wherever I go. Bringing safety wherever I go does not require me to bring violence. In fact, it's 99.999%, if not 100% in my life, the opposite of that. Bringing safety means bringing a sense of awareness and presence, bringing clarity about what my principles are, what is just and right to me, and bringing a willingness to risk my own safety or my own appearance, to risk looking like a fool, to risk being called names, to inquire into behavior that I witness in my life that doesn't feel good. So one example is that just after my beautiful son graduated from high school this year, his whole sort of faculty had a solo graduation moment for him in his gown and everything, and his mom and I were there. My partner was there, celebrated him. We went to a little Hawaiian grill, and the man in front of us in line was ordering his food, the middle-aged guy, gray hair, older, but maybe late 50s, from a young lady behind the counter who was probably 23 years old. And he was trying to make some jokes. The first joke I heard was fairly funny. The rest of the jokes were just kind of off-key to me. He just seemed like kind of a weirdo, and then after he ordered his food and stepped aside, he kept talking to the girl. And at one point, he said something about, I'm just doing market research on young pretty girls. Just market research on pretty young girls. And at that moment, I felt my belly tighten. And I heard my partner kind of go, like she was uncomfortable with what just happened. And then he like grabbed his food and hustled out. Now, what I ask myself about that experience is, now I noticed, and I asked my partner, I was like, when did you catch on that something like unsavory was happening there? Because I heard him being kind of a weirdo, but I didn't see unsavoriness until that last comment. And she unpacked it. Like, I saw unsavoriness happening like as soon as we walked in. I heard the tenor of his conversation there. And I was like, wow, okay. Like taking that in, dropping down to another level of sensitivity, because as a 6'3", almost 200-pound, tall, white, articulate, educated man, I get the privilege of being the least sensitive in the room. I have to pay attention to the least cues of other people because the cues were set for me, by me, on a certain level. And so I'm constantly in this inquiry about, like, how can I be more attuned? How can I pay more attention? And then the thought that just fucking almost brought me to my knees is that if I walked into that place with a sense that if she was my daughter, if this was some dude talking to my 23-year-old daughter, I would not have had it. I would have acted sooner on her behalf and either attended to her and said, I just want to check in with you if you're feeling comfortable with what's happening here, or checked in with him and said, I don't feel comfortable with what's happening here, and I'd like you to know that your comments are sounding off color to me. But I didn't say any of that because I was not inhabiting the quintessence of my protectorship, and I was not walking in the world that day with an awareness of my power and leadership, and with a sense of care, the kind of care that I want to bring to vulnerable people in my society, in my community. So that's one piece of this mosaic around accountability. I would have been a force of accountability to that man. He doesn't owe me any accountability, but the very least I can do is give him some feedback that didn't feel good, and show that young lady that she was not alone in this room feeling uncomfortable. And I unpacked it with her later, and she was like, I deal with guys like that all the time, it's no big deal. But I promise you, if you ever make that move, she doesn't know how big a deal it is, because it's probably never happened to her to have a man step up and call out subtle energetics in a space, call another man out for subtle energetics or not so subtle energetics in a space. And this is where things are moving. We are constantly refining. Every level of mastery comes with refinements. Every time you hit a new plateau in the instrument that you learn how to play, you become more sensitized to the buzzes and to the off notes in the music, because your connoisseurship and your mastery is heightened through a process of becoming more subtly connected to what you're doing. And so it is with our whole society, with our whole societal structure. We become more attuned and sensitized to subtler layers of what's happening. And here's the thing, that is paradoxical about this right now. The masculine and the feminine are in this dance, and we've been doing this dance for a long time, and the dance got really sort of the dance got really kind of death metal over the last millennia or so, in terms of the intensity of the influence of the masculine on societal structures. Right? This is my take it or leave it. That we have something that has been termed patriarchy. We've had something that's been called a lot of things, that has been an experiment that we've been collectively running. Nobody's to blame for patriarchy, but it is an experiment we've been collectively running. Now, the shadows of the masculine and feminine come out in different ways, right? One of the shadows of the masculine is the perpetrator. One of the shadows of the feminine is the victim. These are roles that are shadow roles that we play. Another shadow of the masculine is the insensitive, or the deaf, or the dissociated, while the shadow of the feminine is the hypersensitive and hypercritical, right? And so when these things combine, and they're totally related to each other, things get messy, right? And what happens in a society that becomes hyper-masculinized and moves into a shadow frequency of masculinity is that it becomes insensitive. It becomes deaf to the subtleties. It becomes not listening to women, not listening to the feminine. And that's problematic, right? So we're in this process. Men are in this process, the inheritors of the bulk of masculine energy and the embodiment of masculinity in our culture. And I want to say that men and women both embody both. I'm not here to try to say men are supposed to be all masculine and women all feminine. Nothing in the universe is all yang. Nothing in the universe is all yin. Right? The universe is constantly in dynamic balance. And that dynamic balance requires that yang and yin are in dynamic equilibrium with each other, constantly moving out of and back into equilibrium. But when we have a culture that is where masculine power, punitive justice, force, all of these things are dominant and not counterbalanced by the feminine, then we have a problematic situation. And we have exactly what we're looking at right now from an energetic perspective. And so we're becoming more energetically sensitive as a society. We're becoming more energetically sensitive as a community. Now, sensitivity has its own shadows, right? There is such thing as overly sensitive. There is such thing as using victimhood, weaponizing victimhood. And any of you who have been in the world long enough have seen people do this. This person has wronged me, therefore I have the right to wrong them. I am justified in doing harm to somebody because they did harm to me. Right? Almost every act of violence ever done was basically based on the premise that I've been a victim of someone, therefore I am justified in using brutal force to create justice? I don't know. But I think we've run the experiment long enough, friends. I think we've run the experiment of punitive justice. I think we've run the experiment of too much yang. We've got an excess yang, yin deficiency situation happening from a Chinese medical perspective in our society, right? And back to another story here, another sort of piece of this puzzle around what's my role as a man in my community. What am I here for? One of the things I'm here for is to be a protector and to hold myself accountable first to standards of impeccability, and then hold the people around me who I trust, who I interact with, who trust me, accountable to my understanding of our shared contract for how we operate and and the world that we want to live in. If I ask myself, is that how I would be living in the world that I want to live in, where we're all having what we need? And the answer is no. Then I have some cleaning up to do. I have some integrity to restore. Before I even say that, I just want to say a few words about my own understanding of integrity. And integrity is always in this dynamic relationship with our commitments and accountability. So I am out of integrity if I make a commitment to do something and I don't do it, right? If I'm committed and I don't do it, I'm out of integrity. Now, I restore my integrity by being accountable to that, by owning up that I was committed to that and I didn't do it. And I see the impact that my failure has had on you, and I see that it was not in alignment with my values. That is just honest, true accountability. That's showing up for the conversation. We can't have integrity without accountability because nobody's perfect and nobody's in their integrity all the time. Just recently, after watching President Trump's post, who we can talk about a little later in terms of a beautiful, like perfect picture of the shadow masculine that we are having to look right at. It's in our faces right now. After I watched his address to the protests in the Rose Garden, where he made no reference to any kind of systemic injustices, to any of the validity of the claims of Black Lives Matter, and rather instead focused very briefly on George Floyd, and then moved on to talk about law and order and to talk about people's Second Amendment rights. And I was just watched a sort of watershed moment of seeing fascism in my day. Like, that to me was just the embodiment of fascism and an embodiment of how fractured our narratives are, which is a whole nother conversation. But I got scared, and I wrote a post in my fear talking about how we need to be policing our protests better, as somebody who had not been there. And I got called out for it by people who love me and who know that I'm going to listen. And I got defensive. I was like, but don't you see? But they kept coming. They stayed with me because they know me. They know that I want to hear them. They know that I want to learn and grow. And I had to just put a pause and take that in and sit there with my own defensiveness and my own recognition that there I was again, assuming that people should listen to me and telling other people what to do about their movement. Why? Why would I ever assume that? This is just another moment of white privilege, another moment of a sense of entitlement to something that I haven't earned. And I had to look at that. And not only did I have to look at that on that post, I had to look at that in my whole life. I had to look at the ways that I'm still utilizing a sense of entitlement in the way that I operate, that I'm not completely humanizing people around me. And that was hard, and I was ashamed, and I was angry, and I was sad, and I stopped trusting my power, and I was like, fuck, I feel impotent. I feel like I have so much power, but I don't know what to do with it because I can't trust it because I'm going to use it wrong. But you know what? I went back to that post, and I tagged the people who had called me out, and I said, you're right. Poorly timed and poorly toned. And just acknowledged and admitted my mistake and shared my process. I shared my work. You know, in math, you can't just turn your homework in with all the answers because maybe you did it on a calculator. You have to show your work. Well, if you look at my Facebook feed, you'll see me showing my work. I show my work. I'm not just out there painting pretty pictures of who I am. I'm not just out there trying to say wise things and help people. I'm out there living my life in a fucking, pedal to the metal, messy, real, honest way. But I'm totally willing to get feedback. And I'm totally willing to sit down with somebody who's been hurt by something I've done and have a restorative conversation and learn from it. And that is what is missing from so much of what we are in this culture celebrating as as the masculine protector. That's what's missing from the policing. That's what's missing from our president in a deep way. That's what's missing that I see energetically and just actually literally missing on so many levels. And so when I talk about protectorship, when I talk about divine masculine protectorship, I'm not talking about some like steel shield that is impervious. I'm talking about vulnerable leadership. I'm talking about being willing to engage with somebody in a conversation, to listen to them, and also to be crystal clear about what I see and how I feel. I'm talking about being an advocate for the kind of world that I want to be everywhere I go. Not by making people wrong, but by having a conversation with them. Because when I can catch violence, even the subtle violence of dehumanizing a young woman behind the counter at a Hawaiian grill by asking her questions and then cutting her off when she's answering them and telling her that you're just doing market research on pretty young women. When I can call that stuff out and express my values and the ways that doesn't meet it, he can do whatever he wants with that information. That's him. But I know that I've walked in integrity, and that there's a level of impeccability. There's a level of hitting the fucking bullseye that is so crucial for us as a community and for us as men. I'm talking to you men and those of you who want to embody your divine masculine, to know what your bullseye is, to know what your values are, and to be honest when you miss. Be honest when you miss the bullseye and be the first one to acknowledge it. Don't wait for somebody else to call you out when you've missed the bullseye. Don't hope that nobody noticed and you can get away with it, right? Third personal story that's just right here. It's so relevant to what's happening in the bigger picture, is that one of my best friends for 20 years came and did some work for my former partner. When she was in an emergency situation, she needed her bathroom. Thank you, Brig. Honor indeed, alignment with the truth of nature. We cannot have power if we're not aligned. A building will not stand if it's not aligned. And in integrity, integrity is not a moral term, it's a structural term. And in order to channel all of the energy that you as a human being, as an individual, as a divine incarnation are here to channel, you have to be lined up. You got to have your wiring lined up and your alignment energetically rooted and connected, right? And so my brother came, my dear friend came, and he did a bunch of work for my former partner who had a big emergency and a leak, and it was a septic leak, and the bathroom had to be completely remodeled. People had to be moved out of her house. It was a horrible situation. She had to borrow money constantly just to be able to pay my friend to do this work, but she wanted the work done right. And he worked for a couple months. And he remodeled the bathroom. It was beautiful. But 3 months later, this smell showed up and didn't go away. And she called him after a couple weeks and said, "Hey, got this smell. It's in the bathroom. I don't know what's up. Can you help?" And he just kind of talked her through a few possibilities, but wasn't like, "Oh, okay, let me come take a look and make sure everything's okay." Just talked her through a few possibilities. Months go by. All kinds of different little strategies are done to try to get rid of the smell. We finally figure out last week that the smell was from a place where he cut a drain pipe that then leaked water from our kitchen sink and nasty food into the underneath the house. For months it was just leaking into underneath the house. So there's rotting food and puddles of rotten water under the house. And my former partner Katie is a very agreeable person, and she told him what she wanted. "I'd like you to come out and get a couple things done around the house. I have to hire a remediation crew that has special equipment and special tools and special enzymes to get rid of all of this. It's going to cost me this much. I'd love for you to cover at least this much of it and come out and help with some of the projects as I'm getting ready to sell my house." Well, he comes out and just proceeds to talk her down. Ends up doing 5 hours worth of work on the house. doesn't pay her any money. And I stopped him before he left and I said, brother, like, we got to have a hard conversation. I said, I want you to look at everything that's led up to this moment and ask yourself if you feel impeccable about the energy exchange that's happening here. And my brother who I've sat in fucking men's work holding accountable for years, all defensiveness, no willingness to be accountable. He basically just threw a fit and left. And that's a man who I'm gonna ask our brothers to hold counsel around, to really have a conversation so I can feel clear with him. And this is just another level of accountability. I don't need to call some police. I don't need to make somebody force him to pay me. I need people who know us and trust us to come together and hear us out and help us sort this out. Right? And we've lost the art as a society. We've lost the art. I don't know the names of people 2 doors down from me. We've lost a sense of community. And so it's only when we restore this sense of community, we give ourselves permission to be keepers of the peace. We give ourselves, and we invite people into conversations around how we do that, that we're going to create that safer world. And I'm going to take a deep breath with that, because I just noticed I got really excited. And I got all up here. And I don't want to come from up here with you right now. I want to come from right here. I want to come from my gut. I want to come from my belly. Where this power that I refuse to deny lives and wants to be of service. I was talking to my business partner, Robert Schwenkler. He and Shuja de Peace and I are rebranding the Brotherhood community right now into what we call the Rising Kings movement. And I was talking a little bit about my most beautiful vision for what we could do in the world with this movement, this Rising Kings movement. And I said to him, the king is the only one who serves everybody. The queen too. The king is the only one who serves everybody in the kingdom. Everybody else answers to someone. The king answers to everyone. And we have people in power who are committed to using their power to keep their power. We have so many people who have power who are committed to using their power to keep their power and not to create a harmonious society where everybody's needs are met. And it's occurred to me how fucking weird it is. Just stay with me for a second here. We live in a world and in a society, and I live in, a city where some people don't have enough. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough shelter. They sleep on the streets. They don't have enough care, psychological care for their mental conditions, right? We have veterans all over the place who don't have enough care for the conditions that they have sustained in service of our country. We have a police force that's exposed to some of the most traumatic stuff every single day of their lives, who don't have enough care for their souls. They don't have enough psychological support and accountability. They don't have enough training in how to manage the amount of trauma that they experience on a weekly basis. They don't have enough training in how to de-escalate situations verbally. We have this world where so many people don't have enough of their basic needs met. And in that same world, in my same town, there are people who have so much that they're killing themselves with it. We have people dying over here because they don't have enough. And we have people killing themselves by stuffing too much into them. And that's normal. It's normal. Like, we've just come to accept it. That's just the way things are. And I will not settle in my life for that just being the way things are indefinitely. Because when we live in a world that can leave people on the streets to die, people with mental conditions, our own veterans, to just squander their lives in drugs, in any desperate way to numb the pain of being who they are and having the life that they've lived, while other people just have more than they could ever imagine spending. We have a problem. That is not an equitable and just world. That is not just. So these issues that we face, crime, what is crime a product of? Right? So many things. But there'd be a lot less of it if everybody had enough. If everybody had enough education, if everybody had enough shelter, if everybody had enough food, if everybody had enough meaningful interactions in their day. Enough care from the people around them and from the society that they lived in, that they have a sense of belonging. You belong here. We care about you. That's the feminine, care. Masculine is responsibility. Right? Masculine is freedom. Freedom, care. But I need my freedom. But don't you care? These are not opposed to each other. There is a harmonious balance that can be struck. But we've given certain elements of our society a whole lot of freedom and a whole bunch of people not enough care. And so I'm in this conversation, y'all. I'm in it because I'm a man who works with men, because I care about the future of our world, because I am completely sort of bought into this whole experience of the world as self. That Trump isn't out there somewhere. That at a certain level, Trump is only showing me to me. Black Lives Matter is only showing me to me. That every experience that I have is a perfect mirror and reflection of my own life and my own experience. No matter how far out in the sort of projection field it may get. It's all me, baby. So what am I doing here in this sense of opposition and fight? What's another thing that we have inherited, this idea that we can only get somewhere by force, that we can only have a revolution by war, by violence. We need violence to create change, really real substantive change. But we've seen some movements come in that did not utilize violence in that way. And maybe they weren't perfect, but it's relatively new technology compared to war. Nonviolence. Ahimsa. Satyagraha, the power of living truth. These things are relatively new technologies in the social field. And so we're still perfecting it. And that's all right. And you know what? It takes longer for a human baby to grow to its adulthood than it does a deer to grow to its adulthood, because it's a lot more complex an organism. A lot more complex. And so of course it's going to take a bit longer to create integral change that embodies the values that we are living into every step of the way than it does to grab the guns and mess some things up. We've done it again and again and again and again. We do not need violence to have a safe society. It's kind of weird that those things are so wired together in our brains that we need violence to create a safe society, or the threat of violence. Can you imagine a world where your safety is not guaranteed by the threat of violence? Can you just let that drop down into your belly for a moment? A world where your safety is not guaranteed by the threat of violence. Most of us have lived so long with bellies so hard that we don't even know what it's like to walk in the world with a soft belly. And I get it. I was helping a friend move the other day, picking up the big stuff. It was me and 3 women who were moving all of my friend's stuff from one house to another. And I was realizing that it's possible that all 3 of those women could not lift a dumbbell that I've lifted and thrown up onto my shoulders before. They could not lift 235 pounds between them up to the level of my shoulders. All 3 of them. And it's just another moment for me to recognize that, man, this body I live in, it fucking really has an impact on my experience of the world and the world's experience of me. And I just find it fascinating how many people want to deny that fact. How many people want to deny even subtle differences. I went out into the world after a combo ceremony. It's an intensive it's an intensive medicine that comes off of a frog. It's not psychoactive at all, but it boosts the immune system. That's the word I was looking for. It's an intensive immune booster, and my face was still a little swollen from the experience. And even with just a slightly swollen face, I noticed the different way that people interacted with me. And it just makes me marvel, right? I take for granted on a daily basis that I stand 6 foot 3 inches off the ground and have this build and am white. I take it for granted all the time. We all do, to some extent. Take for granted how we look. We forget. But you know what? I forget more than anybody else, categorically speaking. I forget more than anybody else because the way that I look in 99% of situations is of benefit to me. People look up to me. People want to listen to me. People naturally feel at ease around me much of the time, right? Job interviews and any kind of interview is made a little bit easier for me because of this body that I live in. We treat people differently based on their appearance. We just do. And I see so many people who are unwilling to admit that people in our country are treated differently based on their appearance. Much the less willing to admit the generations of systemic violence and exploitation that has been done to the black community. And I'm just going to talk about the black community right now, even though I'm a huge advocate of the Native American community whose land we live on, stolen, while they are drowning in trauma and addiction and poverty in the little places that we pushed them into when we took their land. But I want to focus on the black community and the inheritance of trauma for a moment. I don't think that we can have an honest conversation about what's happening in this country if we can't acknowledge the inheritance of taking people from their native land, stealing their names and their religion, stealing their culture, not letting them learn how to read or write, forcing them to labor violently, selling them as property. Not just one generation, not just 2 or 3 generations of people, like 10 generations, at least. And then we set them free. Oh, you should be lucky you have your freedom. But they weren't human yet. They just weren't property anymore. And I can't even go in to the layer after layer after layer of systemic targeting of the black community to keep them down. I just don't have the energy to do it. But we can't have a conversation about what a unified, safe country looks like if we can't have that conversation and acknowledge that that wasn't cleaned up. That we didn't clean that up. We did not make amends. We did not have a reconciliation process, a truth and reconciliation process where we said, yes, we did this, and no, it was not right. And yes, we are willing to to make reparations, to if I had enslaved your family and made a fortune, and then it was found out that I'd enslaved your family and I let them out, in our just society, I would owe you guys a lot of money, not just your freedom. Right? I would owe you reparations for the time, for the trauma, for the destruction. But that hasn't really been given, has it? I don't know what that looks like. But I know that it starts by having a bigger conversation about the inheritance. Because while the black community's inherited that, I have inherited the benefits of an economy built on exploiting them. I have inherited the benefits of a land stolen. Right? And that's not my fault. I haven't done anything wrong. But to deny that fact would be lying. I would be lying to myself if I pretended that wasn't true. I would be protecting myself from lots of grief and lots of shame, which I have had the honor of experiencing by facing all of these things over the last 20 years in my work. But when we can't acknowledge the valid voice and concerns of the most vulnerable, then we don't have justice. When protectorship is deaf to that, we don't have justice. When the protectors themselves are not accountable, we don't have justice. We have exploitation over and over and over and over again. And we have unfinished business, America. And we have a leader of our country right now who embodies everything that I believe that we are transmuting, all of the shadow stuff that we are transmuting. A leader who embodies a sense of constantly blaming others and making enemies. You know, the easiest way to create a caucus is to find someone to hate together. This is politics 101 from Nazi Germany. You just got to point somebody out to hate, and that's the easiest way to gel a community. Right? Don't drink the Kool-Aid, friends. On either side, don't drink the Kool-Aid. The haterade. Don't drink the haterade, y'all. It's not good for anybody. Nobody wins on either side, right? But we have a president who had made a political career out of blaming brown people for our country's problems. We have a man who demonstrated in countless ways an utter lack of reverence for the feminine, an utter lack of reverence and respect for women, an utter lack of decency and dignity on so many levels. And we have a president who I've never once heard say, "I made a mistake." I want you to find the clip. If you can find a clip of Donald Trump saying, "I blew it, I'm sorry," man, that would be gold. Because he doesn't do it. Because he can't do it. Because he has to constantly be right in order to feel okay about himself. That is not divine masculine. That is brittle, sad masculinity. That is an embodiment of what it is that we are releasing our bondage to right now collectively. That I'm releasing my bondage to individually. Because as long as my safety is guaranteed by the fact that I'm 6'3" and 200 pounds and white, then I am still not living in that promised land, friends. We have a man in power right now who has not demonstrated his willingness to really listen. I know that he had a black round table full of people who were in his employ and already agree with his agendas. I know that he just signed a surprisingly stronger than I expected, but still very insufficient federal plan for policing. But I'm just talking about him as a man. And I don't understand how people's intuition says that this dude is good. Because every single time I just watch him operate. From The Apprentice, anywhere, any news media, I look at this guy and I'm like, not a healthy creature. Not a healthy creature. My intuition, my spidey senses is tingling. And I'll say the same thing about Hillary Clinton. She did not, my intuition, my spidey senses said, not this person. I don't trust this person. I listen to my intuition. There are lots of people in public places that I trust, even if I don't agree with them. But what we need to do is really look at who we're lifting up as a leader in this society. I saw somebody say something like, as they were celebrating Trump, saying, oh, and I know he has some slightly narcissistic things, but a strong leader needs to have that. No, a strong leader does not need to be a fucking narcissist. No, a strong leader does not need to be a narcissist. A strong leader needs to know how to advocate for his values and how to listen and admit when he made a mistake. There is no true leadership without accountability. And the highest leader in the land is accountable to the most people. But I never saw this man have a conversation with the people who are actually crying out the loudest right now for change, for help. I saw him gather a room full of people who it just makes me a little ill. Who are paid for by Donald Trump. So I think that this is about the end of my transmission. I don't know what to call this thing. I just needed one place to come. I wanted to say these things out loud and try to weave this thing together around what is going on in our societies, what's happening with our divine protectorship, how we as every individual in this society can embody a sense of divine protectorship by being clear about what our values are, by being clear about who we are and the world we want to live in, and being courageous in the face of seeing that world trodden on around us. See people acting in ways that are harmful to others, whether it's a big, obvious, explicit physical violence, or whether it's a subtle microaggression that they're meeting out on somebody. We can call it out. Because I cannot see the back of my head. I can't see it until I see it. None of us can see it until we see it. But as long as we're unwilling to really take it in and feel what it's like to imagine that somebody's feedback could be accurate, that I might be wrong about that. And that's the thing about being wrong, is being wrong about that makes you have to go back and see all the places you were wrong about that in the past, and it's fucking painful. Nobody wants to do it. But I've literally been having dreams, because we're in this fractured narrative in America. We're in this fractured narrative, and I've been having dreams every night this week, chewing on in my dreams on a way to help people, all of us. I'm not saying that blindness is partisan, but we all have blind spots. And I was perfecting the other night in my dream a methodology, a series of questions, and a way of engaging with somebody that would make them see their blind spots, make them recognize and step back from what they were identified from. And I was like, finally honed it down to 100% accuracy before I woke up. And that's what I want to do in this world. I want to find a way to create dialogue across the differences. I want to find a way to create a sense of shared reality where we can find it, so we can build on that, and so we can have substantive conversations about the things we don't agree on. I want to find a way to create some kind of trustworthy journalism again, so that we can agree on a set of facts that we're working on. I want to live in a society that is embodying a beautiful and harmonious relationship between masculine and feminine, between freedom and care, between order and compassion, between, accountability and understanding, between doing and being. And I believe that really starts with a commitment to being of service to the whole at every level of our society, every level of our cellular existence, to be of service. And that requires a willingness to look at all the ways that we're not. So thank you. Anybody who's tuned in and has enjoyed this, has commented. There's a new format here, so I wasn't seeing people's comments, but we really do need to be imagining ourselves into communities where we're holding each other accountable. And I'm not outsourcing accountability to somebody with a uniform and a badge. That's the piece I almost forgot to say. Is like, we are no longer in a paradigm where we outsource authority to somebody else. We outsource protectorship to somebody else. We're insourcing our authority. We're insourcing our protectorship. We're insourcing our capacity to create that reality. What kind of world do you want to live in? And who's going to build it? And if you're pointing at somebody else, I'm sorry, you better look in a little bit deeper there. We're all here to build it. And we're doing it together. I'll have a whole nother post on the fractured narratives and a few other layers of this, but I just wanted to get out here and gush for a little while, and I'm grateful for anybody who's tuned in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, any part of it, anything you'd like to hear me talk more about that you heard me allude to but not really elaborate on. Be really grateful. I'm going to look through these comments before I go. Just really appreciating y'all for thank you for your encouraging comments. Not a whole lot of questions, but good to see you, cousin. My little cuz Tanner. And thanks for tuning in. Please reach out if you have any curiosities and want to poke at me. I'm really open to dialogue, and I'm really interested in trying to understand. And one of the things that I've been really committed to is drinking all the Kool-Aid. Like looking at all the different news sources and all the different media and seeing how things are being portrayed from different sides. I've noticed in my own video feed, because I do that, I'll see the same video, one on top of the other, one from a liberal outlet that says, President Trump owned by a reporter, and then one from the conservative side saying President Trump owns reporter, and they're both the exact same video. Like, that's how disturbing it is. Like, the narratives are disturbing, right? One, like, same exact video, almost the same exact edit. One side says it was a win for the reporter, one side said it was a win for the president. So, been drinking all the Kool-Aid, and so I'm really curious about other people's experience. You have different views. I want to understand them. I want to understand how you got there, because that's just what lights me up. Is having dialogue and really trying to understand each other, hear each other, and also kind of carve our way to some kind of truth through the process. And thank you. I'll call it there. I won't call it there. Actually, I just want to close with a couple of breaths. I want to close by feeling my feet on the floor again, bending my knees. I'm going to invite you to join me in a quick round of breathing that I do often to just clear energy. I'm just going to clear this energy. It's a full breath in through the mouth and the nose, filling the belly and coming up, letting the spine wave a little bit as you do it. Exhale.
Relax and hold. Lengthen the spine, hold the breath out. Big breath in. Hold it.
Then release it with a big ah. Shake it out. Nervous system reset. Thank you, y'all. Be well. Bless you. Talk to you soon.